The parry is probably the single most fundamental combat skill in Lies of P, and if you're struggling with the timing, you are definitely not alone. So whether you're jumping into the game for the first time or diving into the DLC, I put together my absolute best tips to help you nail the perfect parry every single time. And no, this isn't just practice more and get good, these are real practical tips that are actually going to help you improve your timing, so let's get into it. And let's start with the fundamentals just to make sure we're on the same page with how the parry mechanic actually works, and if I miss anything you think is important, definitely be sure to let me know in the comments. The parry, or the guard as it's called, is when you're able to block the enemy's incoming attack. If you hit the timing of the guard exactly, you'll pull off a perfect guard. When you hit a perfect guard, not only will you avoid taking damage, but it'll also build up the enemy's stagger. But the game doesn't actually have a stagger meter or anything that indicates how much stagger damage you're dealing, so this can be a bit tricky to gauge. But build up enough stagger and you'll eventually stun the enemy, leaving them open to a fatal attack. Now it's worth noting here that perfect guards aren't the only way in the game to build up stagger. Heavy attacks, and in particular charged heavy attacks, will also deal stagger damage. And shot puts, which are a throwable that you can find out in the world or purchase from merchants, are another way to deal stagger damage. So to optimize for stagger, you'll want to combine charged heavy attacks with perfect guards, or use throwables like shot puts. Now for some enemies, perfect guarding also has the potential to break their weapon, which will significantly reduce that enemy's ability to deal damage. Now that we have the basics out of the way, let's dive into the fundamentals of the parry so you can better understand what you need to do in order to time it correctly more consistently. I like to break it down into two distinct phases, the parry timing and the parry movement or the animation. To understand the parry timing, or when exactly you need to press the guard button in relation to the enemy's hit getting to you, you really need to better understand the movement itself. See, unlike games where you're more so deflecting or swatting away the hit, like in Elden Ring, or even trying to hit the hit, like in the first Berserker Kazan, with Lies of P, you're trying to fully guard against the hit. Now I know we call it a parry, but it really is more accurate to call it a guard and to even think of it like a guard instead of a parry. I know in this video I've been using these terms guard and parry pretty interchangeably, but sometimes even that subtle shift in mindset that you're guarding rather than parrying can really make a big difference and help you be more consistent with the timing. So with that in mind, you want to make sure that you're fully in the guard position by the time the enemy's hit gets to you. If you're not yet all the way into the guard position, you'll take full damage for the hit. And if you're in the guard position but you get there too early, you won't get the perfect guard. Now another thing to consider with the guard movement is that it's going to be a slightly different animation depending on the size of the weapon you choose. For small and medium sized weapons like daggers and swords, it's a very quick movement where P brings the weapon up in front of his face. For longer weapons like spears or longswords, it's a swinging motion where P brings the weapon up from his right hand and holds it in front of his body. And for large weapons like greatswords, P will have the weapon resting on his shoulder before dipping it down in front of him. Now I've experimented with each of these different weapon types a ton and haven't really found there to be any difference in the timing of the guard. Even though some of these weapon animations feel quick and other ones feel slow, there doesn't really seem to be that much of a difference in the guard timing for each different weapon. So the most important thing here is to find a weapon that you're comfortable with, but also know that the animation for the guard might be different from weapon to weapon, or if you're swapping out different handles and blades. Now one thing that has made a huge difference for me in being able to hit the timing of the perfect guard more consistently is knowing how long to press and hold down the guard button. I think this is one of the areas where players probably struggle the most. One of the ways that Lies of P is different from a game like Sekiro is that when you press the guard button, you really need to hold it there for a second. In Sekiro, you could do this tap press method where you quickly just tap and press the guard button, but in Lies of P, you really want to get in the habit of fully pressing down and holding the guard button. Think of it like you're not only trying to guard against the hit, but you're also trying to absorb the hit. So you want to press the button and hold it down for a beat or two before letting go. Watch it again with the controller overlay. You'll notice that I'm not only pressing the guard button, but I'm holding it down in order to fully absorb the hit. One of the other things that I found helps me is listening to the sound of the guard. You'll notice that when you guard, there's a sound that the weapons make when the two hits collide. Think of it like you're trying to press and hold the guard button through the duration of that sound. For any players out there that are generally more in tune with audio cues, this is something that might be helpful for you. Or feel free to go into the settings and bump up the volume for the sound effects so you can really pay more attention to those audio cues and notice all those little subtleties. Now, as far as when to actually press the guard button, that's of course the trickiest part, but here's what helps me. I like to watch for the swing of the enemy to move forward. Right when the enemy starts to move their swing forward, that's when I press guard. If you look at it again with the controller overlay showing, with the footage slowed way down, you'll see that I'm pressing the guard button right when the enemy starts their swing or their movement forward. Now of course, that's a lot easier said than done, and there are a lot of enemies that have these really delayed swings, or they do these fake outs to try to throw off your timing, so this isn't a foolproof way to do it. But start here and use the data that you get back to improve your timing. If you watch for the swing but you keep getting hit, you're pressing the guard button too late and you need to anticipate the move a bit sooner. If you're guarding but you're not perfect guarding, you're pressing the button too early, and perhaps you need to wait a beat or two in order to hit that perfect guard. Now another thing that helps me, and this one is gonna sound like a no-brainer, but I also want to throw it out there that it's really just important to learn the enemy's moveset. To me, this means going into the fight for the first couple of times against a new boss, not to try to deal a bunch of damage and win, but to sit back and wait for them to attack. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but think of the boss fights in this game like you're a student trying to study their pattern. Instead of running in and attacking, sit back and observe. I try to put together some runs where I just try to dodge and guard for as long as possible before dealing any actual hits. Try to identify when one move starts and ends, and then learn to identify that pattern. Once you have a couple of moves you're pretty familiar with, then try perfect guarding. With this method, it won't be long at all before you're able to beat every boss in the game and make it look easy. But it is also worth noting that it's just not always worth it to parry. Sometimes it really is better to dodge. Knowing when to parry and when to dodge is just as important as understanding the timing of the parry itself. Some bosses really are just a lot easier to beat if you dodge out of the way rather than parry their attacks. And this really is helpful the first couple of times you go up against a boss to just dodge out of the way, avoid taking damage while you learn their moveset. But if you're still having trouble with the timing of the parry, you might want to try experimenting with something that I call the reverse parry. This is essentially where you hold down the guard button all the time, and when it comes time to guard, you quickly let go and then repress the guard button. You'll see with the controller overlay that I'm pressing and holding down the guard button all the time, and when I start to see the swing of the enemy come forward, I quickly release the button and then repress it. Now for me, the timing on this is a little weird, so it's not something that I use all the time, but it does come with the added benefit that you're pretty much always in the guard position. So whether or not you're able to get the perfect guard, you're still able to negate some damage. And like I said at the beginning, at the end of the day, it's better to guard a little than to not guard at all. Now another item that I highly recommend you pick up if you're struggling with the parry is the Perfection Grindstone. The Perfection Grindstone is a grindstone that you can equip that will essentially give you the ability to perfect guard for 15 seconds just by holding down the guard button. You don't need to tap it, you don't need to time it, you just equip the grindstone, press and hold the guard, and you'll perfect block every incoming hit. This really is a get out of jail free card anytime you find yourself in a spot where you're struggling with the timing of a multi-hit combo, and can be a really quick and easy way to deal a bunch of stagger or just avoid taking a lot of damage. Now unfortunately, you won't be able to pick this up until later in the game after you've collected 3 special Venigni collection boxes and turned them back into Policina back at Hotel Krat. This usually happens around chapter 10 or so, but I promise you this is well worth the effort, and if you don't yet have 3 collection boxes, I've put links in the description below that gives you the location for all of them. Now whether or not you've perfected the parry by this point, another item that I'd recommend investing in is the Aegis Legion Arm, and there's a couple of reasons why this is a good all-around option for those that like to parry. Upgraded to level 1, you have the ability to attack while the shield is up, meaning you could sit back from a relatively comfortable position and attack the enemy. Some might consider this a bit of a cheese, but hey, this is a mechanic that they built into the game and this is its intended use, so I say why not take advantage of everything the game has to offer. Now upgraded to level 2, it gives you the ability to guard parry, which does act a little bit more like a traditional parry where you're swiping the shield to knock away the hit and in return you're dealing damage. If you were pretty well acquainted with the parry system in Elden Ring, this one works a lot like that, so this might be a bit more familiar to you. But the one thing you need to watch out for in regards to the timing is that the animation does take a little bit longer, so you need to anticipate the move a bit sooner. And the Legion gauge also starts to drain the instant you pull out the Aegis shield, so once the shield is out, the clock is ticking. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't at least touch on the most badass parry weapon in the entire game, the Two-Dragon Sword. The Two-Dragon Sword is a boss weapon that you can pick up after you've defeated the green swamp monster in the Barren Swamp in chapter 8. What makes this weapon so unique is that the charged heavy attack is a sort of parry move that when timed correctly will block incoming damage and perform a powerful counterattack. Not only does this feel just incredibly satisfying to pull off, but it will also deal an insane amount of stagger damage that will essentially trivialize most regular enemies and even some bosses. But this is the ultimate high risk, high reward parry, and the timing can be really tricky because it's a much longer animation. The animation is essentially P swinging the weapon in front of him before pulling it down into the guard position. And once again, the blade has to be in that guard position in order for it to work. This is certainly a more advanced move to pull off. Since that animation is so long, you need to anticipate the hit much sooner. Unlike the perfect guard where I watch for the swing of the enemy to move forward, with the 2-Dragon Sword, I'm really looking at the windup for the enemy. Once they start their windup, that's when I press the charged heavy attack. And even then, for me, about 50% of the time, it works every time. This is never my go-to move straight away, although I have been considering a New Game Plus playthrough where I only use the 2-Dragon Sword because I just love this move so much, and it feels like the ultimate challenge for someone that really appreciates and likes to parry. Okay, and those are all my best tips and tricks to help you parry better in Lies of P. I hope you learned something new, and if so, leaving a like on this video is always appreciated. And if you have any other tips or tricks for parrying, be sure to let me know in the comments. It might help me or someone else who's watching this video later on. And be sure to subscribe because this is the type of content you can expect to see on my channel. Practical gaming tips that actually help you get better. As always, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.